Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing a very hopefully useful video to you guys. So I'm basically going to be talking through with you my experience of A-level psychology, what you can expect, how to revise and any preparation you should do for it. I've made a list on my phone of everything that I'm going to talk about, so if I keep looking at my phone that is why I've made it in lots of detail so I don't miss out anything. And I'm going to show you like my revision resources and literally everything in this video, so this is the video to watch. I'm just going to start off with a bit of background. So the psychology course I do is AQA and I believe that's what most people do. I went to do psychology without doing the GCSE and I'm going to talk a bit more about that later. It was kind of like spontaneously taken, like a lot of my friends went to the tasters, I didn't go to any tasters. They said that the tasters was really interesting, they told me about them and I was like, that's really interesting. So I was like, do you know what, I'm going to take it as a fourth subject as I was already doing geography, history and maths, and I ended up actually really enjoying it. I found it really interesting and I luckily hated geography, so I dropped that and went back down to 3 A-levels because that is far easier. So it was really spontaneously taken, like I never knew I was going to take it and I almost didn't take it because of timetables and stuff. I would say that it's my easiest subject by a mile, especially since I do maths and history, like they are hard. And it's my best subject. Like I've consistently got A stars throughout the year, which obviously I'm very happy about. I have put a lot of work into it. You definitely don't need to have done the GCSE to take it at A level. My teacher actually said it's better to have not done the GCSE because I think there's maybe one person in our class who took the GCSE, but everyone else starts at the same place. And if you do the GCSE, you kind of have to unlearn stuff you learn at GCSE, kind of taught different things, and it just makes it a lot more confusing. So like obviously it's still fine to take it if you have done the GCSE, but if you haven't, it's literally nothing to worry about. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a bit about my experience. As I said, it was very spontaneous and I found from the off that I found it really interesting. So I'm just going to tell you guys what I've studied this year. So this year I've studied research methods, social influence, attachment, memory, psychopathology, approaches, and I'm now in my summer doing issues and debates, and that probably makes no sense to you guys because you haven't studied them and it's just a title, but that's what I've studied this year and they're very random topics, but as the year goes on and you start studying more broad things, it all starts to link together to one subject, as at the beginning of year 12 it just seems like you're studying random topics that don't link up, but for me now it's starting to link up, and next year I will be studying, and I'll find it in my book because I don't actually know. I'm doing schizophrenia, gender and forensic psychology, but you can also do things like sleep or dreams or something, and then I'm pretty sure there's a topic on like eating disorders, and there's all sorts of like random stuff. So I mean there's some optional topics that you do in the second year. I think if I can compare this to any GCSE I did, it most represents science, because there's a lot of mark schemes and more of a content learning subject than like a skill subject like maths or something. So I think it compares best to science, and obviously I did the old science. I don't know how it compares to your science, but it's probably quite similar. So if that gives it any context, hopefully it does. Usually you'll have like a question and then you have to know which part of the specification they want you to talk about, but it's not simple enough in GCSE where you just like blurt down everything you know about a topic as soon as you see the command word. You have to read the question properly and know exactly how it wants you to approach it, and sometimes it'll ask you something very specific and you might not quite know what it's getting at, and sometimes it will give you a scenario and it won't really mention anything about what you've studied, and you have to apply your knowledge to that scenario. I think the hardest thing about it is the amount of content. There is so much content. And obviously I don't want to put you off, like there's loads of content in every A level, but there's loads of studies you have to know, and you have to know all the statistics about each study perfectly, because if they ask you about that and that's your main essay, if you don't know your statistics you will lose a lot of marks. You have to know psychologists, evaluation points, which I'll get onto later. It's really easy to revise for in the sense that you can just like churn it and you can just memorize it, but I don't find that stimulating at all. I find it so difficult to motivate myself to revise for it because it's so boring to revise. So if you're the sort of person who can sit there learning facts off by heart, then great, good subject for you, but I can't do that. I've got to like do something a bit more creative, if you know what I mean. And I will get into more detail about the sorts of ways you can revise for it that I've found useful a bit later in this video. You can get essay questions, and essentially what an essay question is it will give you like a theory or a study or some research, and it'll ask you to describe the research and evaluate it. And essentially the evaluation is where you have to contradict it with other evidence, or you have to support it, and you kind of, like, it sounds like something that you'd make up on the spot, but you have to learn all your points off by heart before, and usually have about 5 points, and it turns into some sort of discussion of contradicting, going back and forth about whether science supports the study or not, and what different psychologists have said about it. And it will make sense once you go and do it, as I've said many times already. You do usually pre-learn all the points that you're going to say, so it's not as open-ended as it sounds. And I do find it kind of annoying that you have to like learn everything. You can't really come up with your own opinions in there, but as I said, it's a science, so it's not really an opinion subject, it's a science subject. And I think I would say a lot of YouTubers comment on wider reading and extra work, and to some extent, yeah, it's good, but I really haven't done a lot of wider reading this year for any of my subjects, and I've done fine. I don't think for psychology wider reading is essential at all, because it's all on a mark scheme. Knowledge of the whole subject, it's your knowledge of the thing that they're asking you about, so it's all on a mark scheme. Wider reading doesn't really help you. But I do think if you find a certain topic in psychology interesting and you want to read about it, then go, like, by all means go for it. You might find something the rest of the class doesn't know about that does relate to what you're learning about, and you might just want to delve deeper into it, and it's definitely something you can look deeper into because it is so interesting. And I feel like the course only just touches on it because it becomes such a rote learned subject that how interesting it is sometimes gets lost, I feel. So if something interests you, by all means go and read about it, learn more about it. And now I'm just going to talk about how I've revised for it. I would say the first thing is there's so much content. I'm going to show you how big my folders are. This is my first one. I've got my second folder, which is for paper 2. That one's for paper 1. I've also got a small folder full of exam questions that were done in class because I don't have space to store them in there, and a past paper folder. Like, this is the exam questions, and then this is all the past papers. Like, there is so much content to know. So I feel like if you want to do it, you can't afford to not regularly go back and learn stuff. And I think what's really helped for me is our school makes it so that when we finish a topic, we have a long test on that topic once we finish learning it, so we always have to revise for that. And that has meant that I have a reason to go back and do it, and I don't have to self-motivate myself to do it. In my other subjects, I haven't really gone back and looked at the material during the year that much because it's been difficult to stay on top of it, stuff that we're currently doing. But if I'm having to revise for a test, then I'm going back and looking at it, and that helps so much at the end of the year, because I left all my revision till the week before, and there is so much content and I learned it all in a week, which is, when you start to see how much content there is for paper 1, I don't know how I did it. And I wasn't perfect, but I was like near enough that I managed to get an A star on paper. If I hadn't gone and looked back at the content during the year, I would not have been able to revise it. And there's specific things you need to know, like you can understand the concept, but you need to use like specific words, specific statistics, specific names of psychologists, and you need to know which one's which, and I find that difficult because there's so many. So you cannot afford to just do something, leave it in your folder and don't look at it again till the end of the year. Like, you cannot do that. Has definitely helped me is making revision resources throughout the year, and I will show you some of them. Alright, so most of mine at my dad's house, I do have a video where I talk about how I make my flashcards, so that will be linked somewhere on the screen or in the description or whatever. But this is just one of the topics, and I've got flashcards for everything, and these are my lifeline. So I just take these to school if I have a test and I just look through them. And literally, if I'd not made these, I would be screwed. I would be completely screwed because it takes so long to make them, and there's so much, so I wouldn't really have time to sit down and do all of them. So if you don't do it during the year, you're kind of screwing yourself over. So you've definitely got to, like, when you finish a topic, make sure you've got all your revision resources on that topic. And I mean, don't go home and make them the day you've had the lesson, because I feel like if your understanding isn't as full as it could be, then you'll get stressed about doing that. They won't be as good as they can be. So I think study the whole thing, see it all in context, and then have a weekend where you just sit down and do all of them and get them done so that they're ready for whenever you have your end of year tests or whatever tests you have. But I definitely recommend doing flashcards. I also think something that's really important is past papers. As I said, I've got a fair few in here. Obviously I'm going to be the third year to take it, so there's only really specimens, and I kind of have done all the papers now, so I don't know what I'm going to do next year. Past papers are a must though. Like, I think people have spoken about past papers enough for you to know like how important they are, but yeah, definitely do past papers. And if you have tests in your lessons with exam questions, there's only so many exam questions that there are, so if you do all of them, I've found you probably have already done the ones that your teacher puts on the test, if your teacher does tests, that is, which you'll find out. So I found that very useful. I managed to do quite well on a lot of my tests because I'd already done the questions that were in the paper. Also, something that you may be seeing that's not here is a revision guide, and I never used a revision guide for psychology. Like, I don't know, my teacher is very opinionated on things, and she says a lot of the revision guides are a bit crap. Obviously I'm going on her word, I don't know if they actually are, so if you're not sure, I'd recommend buying one and having a look through, and if it helps you then great. But I've kind of just trusted my teacher, which, you know, could be good, could be bad, don't know until results day next year. So I don't have any like revision guide or anything. We do use a textbook in class, and I'll put a picture of it on the screen somewhere, and I've actually met the author of it. She's really nice. I don't use the textbook, I just use the notes that I make in class, which are usually from that textbook or from other sources. And I do use StudyRocket as well, which I've spoke about in other videos, so I'm not going to get into it. But I just I have a lot of sources where I get notes from, so they can be my school notes, the textbook, or PowerPoints or whatever, and then I collate it, and then I put the best version of the notes onto the flashcards for me to learn. And as I said about StudyRocket, I do also read ahead sometimes. Like, if I've got a free weekend and I'm not going out to see my friends or whatever, and I'm a bit lonely and I'm a bit bored, I do sometimes just read ahead just so that I know what's coming, and so I feel like I'm a bit extra. I don't know, it makes me feel good about myself to be like extra. But there have been times that I've read ahead and they have really helped, because I've just already known what's going to be happening in that lesson, and I already know what she's talking about, and I've already made the notes, so it just feels a lot easier and less stressful in the lesson because I've already looked at it. So I already have a basis of knowledge. But obviously a lot of people say to read ahead. You don't have to read ahead, because the content is designed to be delivered in a way that you haven't seen it before. So we also have a lot of example essays given to us, and I use those to make notes as well, because obviously if the essay is what you're going to write in the exam, that's all you need to learn. So that's always good. I've also built a set of digital notes for approaches, and I'm thinking of like selling them on Pinterest, but I'm not really sure if people will buy them. So if you would consider buying a set of approaches notes, let me know. They'd probably be like £3 or something, like not very much money. But I did spend like 6 hours making them. So another revision thing that I do is when I've like lost the will to just read through flashcards or do past papers, I'll just sit down and let my mum test me. And I've spoken on about this before, but it's so much more chilled out, and I actually love doing it because I'm getting to spend time with my mum, and I'm revising, and I don't feel like I'm not bored out of my mind. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about revision. I think I've like rambled a lot about it, so I'm very sorry. That was a very unstructured way of saying it, but hopefully when I edit it down it will be a bit better. But I'm just going to talk about how you can prepare for year 12. So personally for me, I didn't even know I was going to take psychology. Like, I think in my like supplies haul I said maybe I'll take psychology, I don't know. So I literally had no idea I was doing it, so obviously I did nothing to prepare for it. Wasn't given any summer work because I didn't go to any of these sessions, and I don't think anybody got any summer work anyway, so I didn't do anything for psychology over the summer. And honestly I've been fine. Like, I've managed to get A stars all year round, so if your school's designed to not give summer work, there's no reason for you to do any, because you can still do well. Obviously if you are given summer work to do, like, do it. I mean, it'd be a bit stupid not to, but I literally got no summer work for any of my subjects and I've been fine. So I don't think there's any way you need to prepare except what you've been told to do. Of course, if you feel really underprepared and you really want to know what you're in for, like, buy the textbook and you can have a look through and see what it's all about. But if you read the textbook and don't understand stuff, don't stress out, because it will be explained to you and you'll see the exam papers. And you can also look at the exam papers online actually and just see how the questions are asked and stuff. Obviously you won't really understand what the content is about on the paper, but you will see how it's presented and stuff, which may make a lot more sense. There's no specification online though. The specification online's really brief and it's only like bullet points, so it's not very helpful. But yeah, that is all I have to say about psychology, and if you have any questions, please let me know, comment down below. Or you can send me a message on Instagram, even though I'm really bad at replying to messages on Instagram, as some of you may know. Yeah, so I hope that's cleared up anything, and if you feel worried about it still, let me know. I will try and make you feel better. If you have any questions or whatever, like, let me know. And honestly, it's a really interesting subject. Like, if you're interested in that sort of stuff, it's such a good subject to take, and it can be applied to many different things. So I hope that has been helpful, and I will see you guys very soon for a brand new video. Bye!